Welcome to another video. This week we're going to be learning about formatting scores. A score is a selection of sheet music used to study and prepare a piece of music for performance by live musicians. Knowing how to format a clean and presentable score for their music is an important skill set for any composer looking to make a professional name for themselves. In this video, we'll get started by covering all the most important information on formatting your scores. Then we'll cover a few details that often get overlooked by beginners, before ending it all with a comprehensive list of everything you need to include in your score for your next project. So with that, let's get started. So the very first page of any score is called the title page. This is the simplest page and includes all the important information about the score's name and ownership. Here you'll see that I've included the title and subtitle in the largest text, as well as my name, since I'm the one who wrote the music. Some other information that should be added when applicable is the name of the orchestrator, if you hired one instead of orchestrating your sketches yourself, as well as the name of the music publisher responsible for distributing the music. Now, the way you actually format this information can depend a little bit on your own sense of style. Personally, I prefer to just keep it all in the middle of the page, but you are welcome to explore different styles if you'd like. I would recommend starting by just checking out some scores online or finding some at a nearby library just to see what you like. This next page tends to be where we start to see some of the more common mistakes. The instrumentation page carries all of the information that a conductor needs to help prepare for rehearsals. The most obvious being the very long list of every instrument needed to play the music. Again, there are a couple different ways that you could format this, but you will always need to follow score order, which is woodwinds, brass, percussion, piano, harp, and then strings. I'll share a little more information about this in a bit, but for now, just notice how each individual wind instrument gets listed, but the strings are only named by section. Something else to notice is that the percussionists have been listed by player, along with each instrument that they are expected to play, but this isn't the only way you can list them. Another option is to just simply list every percussion instrument that will be needed during the performance, like I did with this piece. Now, which option is preferred is typically going to depend on the orchestra or musicians that you plan on working with. But when in doubt, you can just simply list the instruments needed, like this, so that the percussionists can divide the roles amongst themselves. Something else I want to point out in this score is how the secondary instruments are listed. In this score, I have the third flute and third clarinet swapping instruments throughout this piece. So their respective secondary instruments are placed in parentheses underneath their primary ones. This just lets the conductor know which roles these musicians will need to play throughout the piece. Other than the list of instruments needed to perform this piece, this page should also include some information on whether or not this is a transposing score, which this one is not, a general recommendation for how long the piece is supposed to last, and just any relevant information about the copyright. So with all that taken care of, we can finally get to the sheet music itself. So let's just start with the information you'll need to include in every single score. On this very first page, you'll notice that I have the title, composer's name, and whether or not this is a transposing score right at the top of the page. For the music, you want to make sure that the very first measure has its tempo marking, or at least a very initial BPM for the conductor to reference. Other than this, you want to make sure that every single instrument mentioned on the previous page is included in this very first page of the music, regardless of whether they actually play yet or not. After the first page, you can clean things up and hide all the instruments that aren't playing, but the very first page does need to include everybody. For film scores, you might also include a designated click track right at the very top of the score. This is just a very simple percussion staff that acts as a sort of metronome for the music that includes all the important hit points and their respective timestamps in the film. This is going to help the conductor follow along with the movie while they study the music. In this score, the very first hit point appears at measure 13 on beat 1. Here you can see that I've marked it with an X and both the timestamp and a short description of what's happening on screen. Getting a little more specific, I want to point out that even though each woodwind instrument tends to play a different part, apart, they all tend to share staves within their instrument family. For example, all 3 flutes share a single staff. So do the oboes, so do all the clarinets, etc., etc. The French horns are going to be the exception. They get 2 staves, with the odd number horns being on the first staff and the even numbered horns getting the second staff. The only other common exception will be for musicians who are expected to play multiple instruments. If we check out our other score once more, you'll see that the 3rd flute is given its own staff, where both instruments are listed, with a small asterisk next to the one that they need to start on. After page 1, you only need to include the instrument being used on that specific page. But the big takeaway here is that multi-instrumentalists will get their own staff. And finally, the last big thing that I want to point out here is how you need to include the initial tuning for both the timpani and the harp at the very beginning of the music. Lots of film scores prefer to use accidentals instead of key signatures since they're a little more useful for sight reading purposes. But regardless, in any score that you write, both the harp and the timpani need to have their own specific tunings included above the first measure, regardless of whether the key signature is present or not. You'll also want to include any new tunings at the start of each significant section of the music as well. So that wraps things up as far as formatting goes. There are still a ton of smaller details that we could get lost in, so I've included a PDF in the description of this video that includes a checklist of everything you should be mindful of during your next project. If this is something you'd like to explore in future videos, please let me know in the comments below. But for now, we've reached the end of another video. Real quick, I want to say thank you to my incredible patrons who have made videos like this one possible, as well as thank you to each of you who show your support for this channel through the many different comments, emails, and messages that I've received. I appreciate each of you more than you know. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and share it with anyone else you think might find it helpful. In the meantime, keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music.